is constantly self-evaluating and reevaluating, right? And for some parents, they feel like they don't have time in the day to reevaluate, and this is the lot that was given to me in life. This is how we were raised. I gotta work 16 hours. I don't have time to beat a kid. They should know better. But your child doesn't know better unless you instill it in them.
And
because listen,
that's a whole other podcast in itself, because that's putting unfair expectations on your kid.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Like I said, the reason why gangs are so powerful and influential is because they're going to provide feedback for your kids that you can't. But you're going to be visiting your child in two ways. You're going to go behind the glass, or you're going to go right to the cemetery. And they know that. And why are they still around? And I'm not hating, because I know some gang members. Listen, I'm not talking junk, but what I'm saying is I'm sure if you talk to most people that followed that route, they would say, if we had another chance and I was in a different environment, I would have never done it. And so my attitude is go to the jails, man. Talk to the people that you know that are locked up. You know that it's a severe situation when there's a person that I hung around with, and their older sibling was locked up, and he was probably the hardest dude I knew. Like, I wouldn't have messed with him, and I know I'm a big dude. I've been like, nah, I can't do that. And I remember visiting him one time, and he looked right at me and said, "This is not a place you want to be." So if you know the hardest gangster dude looks at you and says,
"You don't want to come here.
You don't want to come here." You better listen, because it's one thing when my father was saying you want to go to jail. Dad, you ain't sniffed a joint in your entire life. What you know? Like, you know what I'm saying? You don't even drink. You don't smoke on nothing. But when you have somebody who's like how the young kids say, they come out the mud, still in the mud, and they look at you and go,
"You don't want to get in the mud.
This ain't the place for you." That hits different.
Yep.
And so, and not many people like that are looking out for the younger generation. They're not going to give them that because they're going to look at ways to use and abuse their situation for your gain,
to manipulate it.
And so I look at that and I go, parents, you control the avenues your child goes down. Whether you know it or not.
You do.
And okay, 2023, I'm just going to say this. Parents, you could still spank your kids. You can still discipline your children. It can be punitive or appropriate. Nobody's coming to your house and taking your kids away unless you cross a line that you shouldn't have crossed the line. People are going to ask questions. That's okay. Teach your kids how to respond to those questions. I told my kids when they were younger, in our house we call them beatings, but in the community, when you go out, you need to understand that there's different terms. Beating sounds worse to some families, so there's spankings. And if somebody ever called me and said, "We heard you beat your kids," yeah, we call it beatings, but they're spankings. Beatings are a more effective term for my children. Yep. Than, "Hey, come here and spank." Like, that spanking sounds so inappropriate.
Yep.
All right, so there it is. This is a podcast where we feel like we have to add in stuff. I'm gonna let Coach Barry, because I like to talk. I'm gonna let Coach Barry end it.
Well, this podcast was dear to both of us, because we both work with kids and we see what this generation is going towards. And like I said, this podcast is not for the parents that's not at least trying. This podcast is for the ones that are not trying. You need to be called out on your BS right now, because right now, either which way, either you're going to pay for it, or we're going to end up paying for it by tax dollars, keeping your kid incarcerated or keeping them buried 6 feet under. And I'm going to be honest with you, that I wasn't put here on earth to do that.
Yeah.
I was not put on here to do that or to absorb your shortcomings. All it takes is just caring, setting a baseline for discipline in your household. We're not telling you that you have to be extreme to things of that nature, but be an example, the best that you can be. We're not asking you to be perfect, because no one is. When you get called out on your own BS, don't try to justify it. And basically, bottom line, instill some form of discipline in your kids. We're not just talking about when they do something wrong. Discipline about as far as hard work, what they have to do to survive in this world, and forming good habits.
And just an FYI, discipline also means praising your children.
Yes, that too.
It's not always a negative thing. Listen, if a child is doing good at school, maybe school wasn't your thing.
Yep.
But if your child's going to school and they love it, listen to them.
I got a lesson in that last year, because I totally forgot about that, and I'm always big on that in my household. I mean, one day I was at the Boys and Girls Club, and I was talking to the director about these two particular kids. and they did something really phenomenal that day. And these are two kids that would normally spend a lot of time in trouble. He was like, you know something, Barry? He said, go write that up. And I looked at him. I was like, for real? He was like, yo, we just can't write up bad behavior. We got to praise them on the good.
Mm-hmm. I always tell a kid, if I could doodle on you, I can clean you up too. Right? Like, so I could point out every flaw you have, but I could also point out all the things you do well. Mm-hmm. And that's also a generational thing. Yep. Listen, discipline is also generational. Today's generation is not the same that we were growing up, and we have to accept that as grown-ups.
What's that one saying I heard one time? The problem with today's parents are we're trying to parent our kids with yesterday's methods.
Yeah, you can't do it. You just you can't do it. But it's not that methods. The methods don't have to change. Mm-hmm. The message within the methods has to change. Sometimes you just got to suck it up. That's what you get for not listening. Mm-hmm. Now you may have to be like, listen, I've talked to you. I've had this conversation with you, and the reason why you're going to get it now is because this is too much. Like, once or twice is okay. Once, maybe you didn't hear me. Twice, all right, you heard me. But now, by that third time, you should get it because you know what? I'm looking right at you. I'm looking, now you're just trying to piss me off, right? And that's the difference. And kids need to understand that. Listen, like I told my son, would you rather piss me off and I deal with you or piss off a stranger in the street who has no connection to you?
Yep.
What do you think the difference is going to be? They don't have to stop.
Yep.
I do.
I have to stop. Like I used to always tell my son, and like I said, he reminded me how many times I actually had to, like the term you use, beat him and still have fingers left over. But he was like, Dad, with each one, he said, the one thing I appreciated, you told me why. I never did it again, and it helped me grow as a human being.
And then listen, some kids are like me. You could beat me over and over again. I'm going to still do what I do. So guess what? You got to find a different way.
Yep.
And that's where you got to have tools in the tool bag as a parent.
Like with my son, he always knew that if I had to go that route, you don't cross the point of no return. Because that wasn't a beating for him was never the first option, it was always the last resort.
Yeah.
I would try everything else up leading to that point. But if I had to tell him, okay, you need to leave the house for about a good 10, 15 minutes, he knew what was coming. And he would look at me and be like, no, Dad. I said, dude, no. And like, you, one time, okay, 2 times, 3. Now you're getting out of hand with this.
I used to tell my kids, don't make me get up. If I got to get up, I'm principled. You got to get it. Because now you done pushed the limit that just is unacceptable.
Or especially, I remember one time when I had to beat my son one time because he just outright defied me. I was like, if you do this again, this is what's going to happen. It wasn't more than 24 hours.
Oh, listen, my son one time walked up to me with his hands clenched, like he was about to hit me. And my first instinct, I hit him right in the chest, like, ha! With like one knuckle. He fell back like he got hit with a shot. And he was, and he it took about an hour, he came back, I'm so sorry. I said, all I want you to do is know this. Imagine if that was my whole fist. You've been dead, bro.
Yep.
Like that, but like, I also have, you and I are similar parenting. We have a great relationship with our kids.
Yep.
And so there's certain things we can fool around with. There's certain things I can fool around with my son and be like, you're going to get it right. But he knows I'm not fooling around. But it's like that, all right, let me sit my behind down.
Yeah.
Let me stay in my 18-year-old place versus trying to be grown.
Yep.
Right? And, kids hate that sometimes. But I'm telling you something right now. The one thing that I realized in my 20-some-odd years working with kids crave structure and discipline.
Yep.
They may not understand it. They're going to push back because that's their job. But in the end, they want to know what the expectations are. Kids want to know that it's fair and it's equitable and the expectations are right here and they don't change because of who you are.
Yep. And the thing is, the one thing I use against kids nowadays is I hold them accountable. Yeah. I be like,
somebody got them.
I was like, what makes you think, okay, like one of the things I always use is say, what if somebody did that to you? Would you like it? No. So much think it's okay to do it to somebody else.
I ask kids that I discipline in my classroom, right? I pull them aside after, especially if I have to do it out loud in front of people. I don't want them to feel like I embarrassed them or in the relationship, so I'm going to pull them aside after. I always say this. Hey, just out of curiosity, how many times do you speak to your friends and try to explain what you don't like? How many times do you give them before you flip out? 3? Some kids will be like, 5. Okay, that's a good friend, right? But after that 5th time, what happens? Oh, then I got to let them know. And I got to let them know loud. Okay, so I asked you to get off your phone 7 times. would you have given you 7 times? And most of the time they say no. Because they have to understand, maybe they didn't get that at home. Maybe they got it at home, but because of the structure and the way that things moved,
it wasn't consistent.
It wasn't consistent. Like that. Maybe you had to move out. Like, there's so many variables,
different components to it. Yeah,
right. That maybe it's consistent for the ability of that parent to be consistent. Right. If you got to take extra shifts every week, but you don't know if those extra shifts are going to be available until they are. You can't have the same consistency as somebody that works just a regular 9 to 5. True that. You can't. But there should be enough consistency within your parenting that the structure is there. Because sometimes parenting is unstructured in the sense that, like, I remember working for the state and getting mandated. I'll be home at 7 in the morning. So I can't tuck my kids in. Or when I work first shift, you get mandated the second, or you took overtime, you're not home until 11 o'clock at night. Kids want your daddy home or mommy home, but I can't be because I got to provide, right? So that's that inconsistent balance. But when I'm home, the consistency should be there.
Yep.
Do you see what I'm saying? And that's so I think clarifying that for parents will help them out. But in the end, I'm gonna shout out Coach Barry because he did a lot of the work, and
basically what we're just saying out here, just discipline your kids before the world has to, because it's not going to be pleasant. It's not going to be pleasant. Seek the help if you need it. Tap into your village that helps you. You know what I'm saying? And more importantly, when it's time for you to discipline your kids, it's no real reflection on you. The only time it becomes a bad reflection on you, that if you don't recognize the bad behavior and do something to help change it. That's when it becomes a reflection on you. Plain and simple. But please, discipline your kids before this world has to, because the world is not going to be kind.
The world is not a nice place for discipline. Because it's not going to be discipline, it's going to be punitive.
Yep.
That's basically what it boils down to. It's going to be punitive punishment. No consequences, punishment. 10 years. No ifs, ands, or buts. Okay. $100,000 fine. What the hell, right? Like, so in the end, we always end just discipline your children.
And be a blessing.
And we're out.